So I'm going to be reading from this book, Meet Josefina, an American Girl, book 1. And I even have a mini Josefina doll. So I'm just going to set her down. She's going to be off camera, but I have her with me during all my lives. So I'm going to be starting with chapter 2. So let's see. I have a couple people here, so I'll start. So it's chapter 2, Abuelito's Surprise. The afternoon sun was so strong it made the ground shimmer. Josefina dipped the drinking gourd into the water jar and took a long drink. Like everyone else on the rancho, she was up earlier than usual after her siesta, the midday rest. Papa had heard that the caravan was not far away. It would come this afternoon. Everyone was eagerly bustling about, preparing for its arrival. Josefina poured some water into her cupped hand and held it to her face, cooling first one cheek and then the other. Then she opened her hand and let the water fall on a small cluster of flowers below. Mama had planted these flowers, which grew in a protected corner of the back courtyard. Josefina's house was built around 2 square courtyards. The front courtyard was surrounded by rooms where Josefina and her family lived. The back courtyard was surrounded by workrooms, storerooms, and rooms for the servants. The 2 courtyards were connected by a narrow passageway. So this is what it looked like. This is like what her house looks like. Mama, with Josefina at her side, had tended her flowers in the back courtyard with great devotion. She started them from seeds sent to her from Mexico City by her sister, Tia Dolores. Josefina remembered how pleased Mama had always been when the caravan brought her some seeds from Tia Dolores. It had always seemed like a miracle to Josefina that the small brown seeds could, with water and Mama's care, grow into beautiful, colorful flowers. Since Mama died, Josefina had cared for the flowers by herself as best as she could. Just now, she sprinkled the rest of the water into the drinking gourd on them. I'm glad you remembered to water your Mama's flowers, Josefina. Josefina turned and saw Papa. He was so tall, she had to lift her chin to look at his face. Things grew well for your Mama, didn't they? Papa added. Yes, Papa, Josefina answered. Mama loved her flowers. So she did, said Papa, dipping the drinking gourd into the water jar. And I hear Florecita likes flowers too. Josefina blushed. Don't worry, said Papa. You'll stand up to Florecita when you're ready. Josefina grinned a little bashfully. She watched Papa drink his water. So that right there is Josefina, and that's her Papa. Papa's eyebrows were so thick. He looked fierce until you saw the kindness in his eyes. All the sisters were respectful and rather shy of Papa. He had always been saving of his words, but since Mama died, he became especially quiet. Josefina knew his silence didn't come from sternness or anger. It came from sadness. She knew because she often felt the same way. Mama used to say that Josefina and Papa were alike. They were both quiet, except with their family, but full of ideas inside. Papa didn't have Mama's easy manner with people. It had always been Mama who remembered the names of everyone in the village, from the oldest person to the newest baby. She remembered to ask if an illness was better or how the chickens were laying. She gave advice on everything from growing squash to dyeing wool. Mama was well loved and well respected. She was Papa's partner. She ran the household while he ran the rancho. Josefina knew that Papa missed Mama with all his heart. Papa tipped the gourd so that the last drops of water fell on the flowers. He smiled at Josefina and then strode off out the gate towards the fields. Josefina carried the water jar into the kitchen. "Oh, there you are, Josefina," said Anna. Her hands were covered with flour, so she had to use the back of her wrists to brush off the sweat off her forehead. The heat of the cooking fires was making her face red and her hair stick out. Pots full of delicious-smelling concoctions sizzled, steamed, and burbled over the fires. There was always a big fandango in the evening after the caravan arrived. Neighbors from the village, friends from the Indian pueblo, and all the people traveling with the caravan were invited. They came to Josefina's family's house to eat and drink and sing and dance and celebrate the caravan's safe return. Mama had always known just what to do to prepare for the fandango, but this was the first time Anna was in charge. Josefina could see that Anna was overwhelmed, even though Carmen, the cook, was helping her. 2 other servants were making tortillas as quickly as they could. Francesca and Clara were helping too. They were peeling, chopping, and stirring as fast as their hands could move. "Thank you for the water," said Anna. She handed Josefina a large basket. "Now, please, go to the kitchen garden and get me some onions." "I'll come too," Francesca said. "We need tomatoes." The kitchen garden was just outside the back of the courtyard. Josefina always thought the garden looked like a blanket spread on the ground. The neat rows of fruits and vegetables and herbs made colorful stripes. The squash made a yellow stripe. The chilies made a red stripe. The pumpkins were orange. The melons were light green. And the beans were dark green. In between the rows, the earth was a dark reddish brown, thanks to the water the girls carried up from the stream every day. A stick fence, like a blanket fringe, surrounded the garden to keep hungry animals out. The sisters were all proud of the garden. Josefina had gathered a basket full of onions when suddenly she stood up. Francesca stood up too, and the girls looked at each other. "Is it?" Francesca began. "Shh," said Josefina, holding her finger to her lips. She tilted her head and listened hard. So this is Josefina with her sisters in their house preparing the food. And this is the garden they were referring to, where they grow all their vegetables. Yes, there it was. She could hear the rumble and squeak of wooden wheels. That meant only one thing. The caravan was coming. Francesca heard too. The girls smiled at each other, grabbed their baskets, and ran as fast as they could back to the gate. "The caravan, it's coming!" they shouted. "Anna, Clara, it's coming!" They dropped their baskets outside the kitchen door as Clara rushed out to join them. The 3 girls dashed across the front courtyard and flew up the steps of the tower in the south wall. The window in the tower was narrow, so Josefina knelt and looked out the lower part. Francesca and Clara stood behind her and looked over her head. At first, all they saw was a cloud of dust stirring on the road from the village. Then the sound of the wheels grew louder and louder. Soon, they heard the jingle of harness, dogs barking, people shouting, and the village church bell ringing. Next, they saw soldiers coming over the hill with the sun glinting on their buttons and guns. Then came mule after mule. It looked like 100 or more to Josefina. The mules were carrying heavy packs strapped to their backs. She counted 30 carts pulled by plodding oxen. The carts lumbered along on their 2 big wooden wheels. There were 4-wheeled wagons as well. And so many people, too many to count. There were muleteers, cart drivers, traders, and whole families of travelers. There were herders driving sheep, goats, and cattle. Villagers and Indians from the nearby pueblo walked along with the caravan to welcome it. Francesca stood on tiptoe to see better. She put her hands on Josefina's shoulders. "Don't you love to think about all the places the caravan has been?" she asked. "And all the places the things it brings comes from too?" "Yes," said Josefina. "They come from all over the world, up the Camino Real, right to our door." Most of the caravan stopped and set up camp midway between the village and the rancho. But many muleteers and some of the cart drivers camped closer to the house in a shady area next to the stream. So that's the tower that Josefina was looking out of. And that's the caravan, or the beginning of it rather. Josefina saw Papa ride his horse up to one of the big 4-wheeled wagons. He waved to its driver. "That's Abuelito!" Josefina cried. She pointed to the driver of the 4-wheeled wagon. "Look, Papa is greeting him. See, there he is." Francesca leaned forward. "Who's that tall woman sitting next to Abuelito?" she wondered aloud. "She's greeting Papa as if she knows him." But Josefina and Clara had already turned away from the window. They hurried down from the tower. Josefina ran to the kitchen and stuck her head in the door. "Come on," she said to Anna. "Papa and Abuelito are on their way up to the house." Oh dear, fussed Anna as she wiped her hands and smoothed her hair. "There's still so much to do. I'll never be ready for the fandango." When Papa led Abuelito's big wagon up to the front gate, Josefina was the first to run out and greet it. Francesca, Clara, and Anna were close behind. Josefina thought she'd never seen a sight as wonderful as Abuelito's happy face. He handed the reins to the woman next to him and climbed down. "My beautiful granddaughters," said Abuelito. He kissed them as he named them. "Anna and Francesca, Clara and my little Josefina. Oh, God bless you, God bless you. It is good to see you. This is the finest trip I've ever made. Oh, the adventures, the adventures. But I am getting too old for these trips. They make me old before my time. This is my last trip, my last." "Oh, Abuelito," said Francesca, taking his arm and laughing. "You say that every time." Abuelito threw his head back and laughed too. "Ah, but this time, I mean it," he said. "I brought a surprise for you." He turned and held out his hand to the tall woman on the wagon. "Here she is, your tia Dolores. She has come back to live with her mama and me in Santa Fe. Now I have no reason to go to Mexico City ever again." Josefina and her sisters looked so surprised. Papa and Abuelito laughed at them. Tia Dolores took Abuelito's hand and gracefully swung herself down from the wagon seat. Papa smiled at her. "You see, Dolores, you have surprised my daughters as much as you surprised me," he said. "Welcome to our home." "Gracias," Tia Dolores answered. She smiled at Papa and she turned to the sisters. "I've looked forward to this moment for a long time," she said to them. "I've wanted to see all of you, my dear sister's children." She spoke to each one in turn. "You're very like your mama, Anna," she said. "And Francesca, you've grown so tall and beautiful. Dear Clara, you were barely 3 years old when I left. Do you remember?" Tia Dolores took Josefina's hand in both of her own. She bent forward so that she could closely look at Josefina's face. "At last I meet you, Josefina," she said. "You weren't even born when I left. And look, here you are, already a lovely young girl." Tia Dolores straightened again. Her eyes were bright as she looked at all the sisters. "I'm so happy to see you all. It's good to be back." The girls were still too surprised to say much, but they smiled shyly at Tia Dolores. Ana was the first to collect herself. "Please, Abuelito, and Tia Dolores, come inside and have a cool drink. I'm sure you're tired and thirsty." She led Tia Dolores inside the gate. "You must excuse us, Tia Dolores," she said. "We haven't prepared any place for you to sleep." So this is the family meeting for the first time. Hi, I just saw your comment. I'm sorry. "Goodness, Ana," said Tia Dolores. "You didn't know I was coming? I didn't know myself, really, until the last minute. I've been caring for my dear aunt in Mexico City all these years. Bless her soul. She died this past spring. It was just before Abuelito's caravan arrived. I had no reason to stay. So I joined the caravan to come home." "Yes, Abuelito," said to the girls. "Your grandmother will be so pleased. Wait till Dolores and I get to Santa Fe the day after tomorrow." What a surprise, eh? Josefina could not take her eyes off Tia Dolores as everyone sat down together in the family sala. The room's thick walls and small windows kept it cool, even in the heat of afternoon. Francesca whispered, "Isn't Tia Dolores' dress beautiful? Her sleeves must be the latest style from Europe." But Josefina hadn't noticed Tia Dolores' sleeves or anything else about her clothes. "This is Tia Dolores," she kept thinking. "This is Mama's sister." Josefina studied Tia Dolores to see if she looked like Mama. Mama had been the older of the two sisters, but Tia Dolores was much taller. She didn't have Mama's soft, rounded beauty, Josefina decided, nor her pale skin or dark, smooth hair. Everything about Tia Dolores was sharper somehow. Her hands were bigger. Her face was more narrow. She had gray eyes and dark red hair that was springy. Her voice didn't sound like Mama's either. Mama's voice was high and breathy, like notes from a flute. Tia Dolores' voice had a graceful sound. It was low and clear, as notes from a harp string. But when Tia Dolores laughed, Josefina was startled. Her laugh sounded so much like Mama's. If Josefina closed her eyes, it might be Mama laughing. There was a great deal of laughter in the family sala that afternoon, as Abuelito told the story of his trip. Josefina sat next to Abuelito, her arms wrapped around her knees. She was happy. It reminded her of the old days to sit with her family this way and listen to Abuelito tell about his adventures. "This was the most remarkable trip I've ever had," said Abuelito. "Oh, the trip to Mexico City was dull enough. But on the way home, bless my soul, what an adventure. We were in terrible danger. Terrible. Terrible. And your Tia Dolores saved us." "Oh, but I didn't," Tia Dolores began. No, my dear daughter. You did save us," said Abuelito. He turned to Papa and the girls. "You see," he said, "I was so glad that Dolores was going to come home with me. I finished all my business in Mexico City as quickly as I could. All went well until the day I came to Dolores' house to load up her belongings. Then the trouble began." He lowered his voice. pretending he did not want Tia Dolores to hear. I had forgotten how stubborn your Tia Dolores is. She is perhaps the most stubborn woman in the world. What did she insist that we bring? You'll never guess. Her piano. Amazed, all the girls repeated, her piano? Yes, said Abuelito. He was pleased to have astonished them all. Such fuss and trouble. I told her it was too heavy and too big. But she said she'd sooner leave all her other belongings than her piano. So I grumbled, but I allowed the piano to be packed and loaded onto one of my wagons. We left Mexico City, and I complained about the piano every mile of the way. He shook his head. Your Tia Dolores never said a word. She just let me go on and on complaining. Well, then we came to Dead Man's Canyon. And you know what happened? What? Asked the girls. Thieves, cried Abuelito, in a voice so loud the girls jumped. Thieves attacked the caravan. Oh, you've never seen such a fight. Shouting, sword fights, gunshots. The wagon with the piano was just behind ours. We saw 2 thieves climb up on it and push the driver onto the ground. Then 6 or 7 of our men rushed over and wrestled with the 2 thieves, trying to pull them off the wagon. With all the yelling and fighting, the oxen harnessed to that wagon were scared. They bumbled into each other, trying to get away. The wagon lurched forward, right to the edge of a gully. And then crash! Over it fell into the gully. The girls gasped. Abuelito put his hand on his heart. God bless us and save us all. What a sound that piano made when it fell. He said, a thud, and then a hollow boom that rumbled like musical thunder. It sounded like a giant had strummed all the keys in one stroke. The terrible sound bounced off the walls of Dead Man's Canyon. It seemed to grow louder with every echo. The thieves were terrified. They'd never heard such a sound in all their lives. Well, didn't they take off as if they were on fire? All of them ran away as fast as their thieving legs could carry them. I'll bet they're still running. Everyone laughed. Abuelito laughed most of all, remembering with pleasure how frightened the thieves were. When he stopped laughing, he said, after that, I put the piano into my own wagon. I never complained again. And so you see, Dolores did save us all by insisting that we bring her piano. Well done, Dolores, said Papa. But Abuelito, said Josefina, was the piano badly hurt? Tia Dolores answered, no, child, she said. One leg is splintered and the top is scratched, but I think it will sound fine. Oh, Josefina blurted. May we see it? No, said Abuelito. We had to rebuild the crate. It's too much trouble to open it up. You'll just have to come to Santa Fe sometime to hear your aunt play. Papa cleared his throat. The girls and I have never seen or heard a piano, he said. May I open the crate? I'll close it up afterwards. Tia Dolores turned to Abuelito. Please, she said. I'd like the girls to hear the piano. Abuelito laughed and shrugged. Of course, my dear. Of course, he said. How can I say no to you after you saved my caravan? Tia Dolores kissed him. Then she and Papa led the girls outside to the wagon. The piano was in a big wooden crate. Papa pried a few boards off the crate. Tia Dolores climbed into the wagon. She reached into the crate and pushed back the lid that protected the piano's keys. She couldn't stand up straight, and she didn't have much room to move her hands. But she played a chord. And then, as Papa and the 4 girls listened, she played a spirited tune. Josefina felt the music thrum through her whole body. It made her shiver with delight. The notes were muffled because the piano was in the wooden crate. But to Josefina, the notes sounded as beautiful as bells all chiming together in harmony. She had never heard music like the piano's music before. The notes were so full, so perfect and delicate that Josefina imagined she could almost see them as they filled the air. Josefina listened. She realized that, through the music, Tia Dolores was telling them how happy she was. The music expressed her happiness better than words ever could, because it made all of them hearing it happy too. Josefina stood, barely breathing, listening until Tia Dolores stopped. "Oh dear," said Tia Dolores. "I'm afraid the piano's a little out of tune, and I'm a little out of practice." Gently, she closed the lid over the keys. Josefina wanted very much to touch the piano keys. She wanted to make the wonderful music happen herself. But she was too shy to ask Tia Dolores, so she said nothing. "Gracias, Dolores," said Papa as he helped her climb down from the wagon. "Oh yes, gracias," said Anna, Francesca, and Clara. "You must all come to see me in Santa Fe," said Tia Dolores, smiling. "I'll play for you and show you how to play the piano yourselves." The three oldest sisters followed Tia Dolores back inside the house, but Josefina stood next to the wagon until Papa had finished closing the crates. She wanted to stay near the piano as long as she could. She knew she would never forget the way Tia Dolores' music had sounded, or the way it made her feel. When Papa was finished, he saw Josefina. "You like the piano music, didn't you?" he asked. "Oh yes, Papa," answered Josefina. "I didn't want Tia Dolores to stop." Papa smiled. "I didn't either," he said. "Well, there'll be plenty of fiddle music at the fandango tonight. You better go in now and get ready. The guests will be coming soon." "Yes, Papa," Josefina answered. She took one last look at the piano crate and then started back inside. As she walked, she thought, "I wish there was some way I could let Tia Dolores know how much I love the piano music. I wish I could give her something in return. But what?" Later, when Josefina walked back into the courtyard, she knew the answer to her question. She thought of a fine gift to give Tia Dolores. "I'll give it to her during the fandango tonight," she decided. She was pleased with her idea. She thought Tia Dolores would be pleased too. All right, so that's it for chapter 2. So I'll be going live soon again to read chapter 3. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you aren't already, give me a follow so you can find out when I'm going live again if you enjoyed this book. Also, be sure if you haven't, like the live. And anyway, I hope you all have an amazing weekend. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. And I hope to see you all soon. Bye.